Bob Allison off a blast by Kenny Hunt deprived them of victory in a 4-2 game.
Line drive down the left field line and hooking from Allison, who dives, makes a practice.
A drive to left center field, deep to the gap. And the Twins take the lead.
I grew up in a very small town in western Minnesota, baseball fan even at age 5, and I remember hearing about the first Twins game where this guy named Bob Allison hit the first home run in Twins history. He was a football player who played baseball, very aggressive, very strong, and I think that's one of the reasons he became my favorite player. By the time I met him, he was already suffering the ravages of ataxia, even the most menial physical tasks he was struggling with. It proved to me that ataxia can hit anyone, even in the peak of health. It can strike you down, as it did Bob.
Father and son's Twins games, they had annually, and this is my dad, obviously, and the 3 boys. Well, this is probably the most famous play that my father's known for. This is in the 1965 World Series Game 2. Makes the dive, catches the ball, and slides across the foul line. About the time he's getting ready to retire, he was starting to have some trouble standing and walking and things with speech. And he saw several doctors and eventually ended up going down to Phoenix, Arizona, his winter home, and found a doctor down there that took a look at him, and he said, "Bob, I think you might have what's called ataxia." And of course, nobody knew what ataxia was. So the first question was, well, where do we find out more about it? Where's the best place to go? And they said, guess what? University of Minnesota.
University of Minnesota has been very strong in ataxia research since the beginning. The word ataxia means lack of coordination, and it can be a symptom of many neurological diseases and cause incoordination, lack of balance, and issues with gait.
It's a very devastating disease for patients. We lose important attributes of being a human, clarity of speech and clarity of thought. Cellular pathways are disrupted that lead to loss of neurons and neurological dysfunction.
Whether it's Parkinson's, ALS, ataxia, for so long there hasn't been any real medical hope.
Dad, after he was diagnosed, was determined to do something. Creating the Bob Allison Ataxia Research Center was the thing he could do to best progress the funding for the research at the university. And in the meantime, we're helping patients. If it's a walker or if it's a wheelchair, whatever the case may be, we're just trying to make their lives better. And if we can learn something about ataxia, we can also learn something about Parkinson's and ALS. It improves everybody's chances. Dave St. Peter, the president of the Twins, and myself and Chuck Lynch, another board member, found a way to fund ataxia research, fund a clinic at the University of Minnesota, but also to celebrate baseball in the Twin Cities, and that's how we got into the Diamond Awards.
What a wonderful idea to have a wintertime awards banquet that would be the driving force behind some important research for ataxia and these other diseases. Current players and former players, they're all committed to giving back to this community that has given them so much.
My first grant was from Bob Allison Ataxia Research Center. Now we have a large team of investigators that focus on imaging and ataxias, and we are the lead site in national and international efforts. Our work really has flourished. We have been in particular researching hereditary ataxias that cause loss of nerve cells in the cerebellum. We now know that the changes in the brain start decades before the actual symptoms. So that gives us a window for interventions before nerve cells die.
We're finally at that juncture with genetics where we're finding the answers for a lot of families that have really gone for decades without knowing what type of ataxia is in the family. We could not have done a lot of the things that we have done in the molecular diagnostics laboratory without the support of BARC. Through that program, we've been able to offer testing to dozens, if not hundreds, of patients with ataxia, and that is giving us targets for research and treatment.
We've gone from not knowing anything about the disease to finding the gene that causes the disease, to now partnering with a pharmaceutical company to develop a potential treatment. The Bob Allison Group has supported the development of a strong ataxia community here at the University of Minnesota to move our research forward.
And if we're that close, if they're that close, it would seem so easy to just get over the top and do what has been the mission of the Bob Allison Ataxia Research Center for for the last 20 years.
That's why we're here for the Diamond Awards, and it's my father's legacy. My dad always wanted to be part of something where we found the cause of the cure for ataxia. He didn't live long enough to reach that goal. But every day we see progress, and every day that we see progress, we see people's lives change, and that's what's most important to us.